Wait a minute. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Well, thank you. If you didn't notice, Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." So what do you think of when you hear the word peace? The opposite of war? Absence of war? A symbol? Maybe a famous rock star using the stage to make a political statement? Bumper sticker on the back of someone's car? A bunch of burned out hippies making love, not war, in a commune somewhere? Or maybe your conceptions of peace are maybe a little less exotic. Maybe it's a tranquil garden or inner contentment with who you are. Whatever you think of when you hear the word peace, and whatever emotions or notions our culture might have about it, peace seems to be one of those few words that usually evokes images of unqualified good. I mean, who doesn't want peace after all? While many people, too many people, I think, are willing to use violence to try and achieve peace, there are precious few who would say that they don't want peace. Everyone along the spectrum, from pacifism on one end to Christian militarism on the other, want peace. They simply disagree about how peace is to be obtained. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find many people who would seriously say that they actively long for chaos and violence. So let's agree, as we begin, that the vast majority of us want peace. But if you noticed in our scripture text, Jesus isn't just talking about wanting peace. I think he assumes we all want it, that that's a good thing for which we were created and toward which we ought to strive. But if you notice, the people whom he called blessed are those who go out and make it happen. Just a quick aside that I read, I thought it was kind of interesting, that many Christians demand that the Ten Commandments be posted in public buildings. But have you heard anyone demand that the Beatitudes be posted anywhere? Blessed are the merciful in a courtroom. Blessed are the peacemakers, maybe in the Pentagon. Friday, as I said earlier, is International Day of Peace, or World Peace Day. It was first established by the United Nations in 1981. The UN declared that Peace Day should be devoted to commemorating and strengthening the ideals of peace, both within and among the nations. International Day of Peace is also known as the Day of Ceasefire. On Ceasefire Day, the world calls for and prays for the guns to fall silent everywhere, at least for one day. The Hebrew word for peace is shalom, often used as a greeting word or a departing word in much the same way we would use hello or goodbye. It's a broad term related to health and prosperity, harmony and wholeness. It means perfect welfare, serenity, fulfillment, freedom from trouble, and liberation from anything which hinders contentment. When a Jew says shalom, he or she is wishing on another the full presence, peace, and prosperity of God. The famous Aaronic, A-A-R-O-N-I-C, benediction found in Numbers chapter 6, verses 24 to 26, kind of brings out this idea pretty clearly. You've heard us sing it a number of times. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. And Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Into a world that is ugly with violence and hate, Jesus sends us to be peacemakers. Now, some people say, well, now that's just nonsense. All you have to do is see all these so-called Christians who have been involved in bloody conflict after bloody conflict in history, all done in the name of God. We have Joshua and David and Gideon in the Old Testament, who all went to battle just because God told them to. And what about all the other bloodshed in the Old Testament? Or as the famous Bill Simmons says, what about all the smiting that goes on? It's full of violence, much done in the name of God. What about God himself, who floods the entire world and wipes out every man, woman, and child, and every living thing except those that Noah protected? What about Sodom and Gomorrah? None of that appears very peaceful, does it? And yet Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers. You may well say, well, tell that to the radical Muslims. Tell that to Al-Qaeda, to the suicide bombers, to conflict-ravaged Israel and Palestine. Tell that to our world, which is not exactly peaceful. And you know what? That's exactly what Jesus did. He told us, be peacemakers. But 2,000 years later, we're still not listening very well, are we? As someone once said, when Jesus urged us to love our many enemies, he most certainly didn't mean to kill them. You see, we no longer live an eye for an eye, do we? But if that's true, how do we answer the following questions? Would Jesus, the Jesus we read about in the Gospels, the Jesus we proclaim, under any circumstance, stick a bayonet in another human being? Would he drop a bomb on a village full of people? Would he shoot someone in the face or run someone over in a tank or even bulldoze their homes? To me, the answer is no. You know, it's interesting, in the aftermath of 9/11, nearly the whole world identified with us, sympathized with us, even suggested that today we are all Americans. Many of those who offered us their prayers and consolation knew what we were going through, as such terror had already been so familiar to them. Yet rather than accepting their invitation to be in solidarity with them, both in terms of our shared experiences and our shared efforts to build a world free of terror, we chose to see ourselves as exceptional. We chose to see ourselves as people whom this kind of thing should never happen, and thus we had to respond with such military might and furor as we could muster, determined to make someone pay for what had been done to us, to bring them to justice. 17 weeks and 15 days later, 2 long wars later, more Americans have perished since then as on that faithful day, as well as countless others of our Iraqi and Afghan brothers and sisters. And I don't know if it's clear that we're safer now as a result of having squandered so much to accomplish so little. Imagine if instead we had sought to use our vast resources to build up rather than tear down those same places in the world, seeking instead of defeating and dominating them to rather befriend and empower them. And Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers. The word make in the term peacemakers comes from the Greek verb that means to do. It's a word that mandates action and initiative. Someone has to bring the combatants to the table and give them a reason to put down their arms. Notice Jesus didn't say, "Blessed are the peace wishers," or the peace hopers, or the peace dreamers, or the peace lovers, or the peace talkers. You see, peace must be made. Peace never happens by chance. A peacemaker is never passive. They always take the initiative. They are up and doing. So when these two words come together, peace and maker, it describes one who's actively pursuing peace. Peacemaker pursues more than just the absence of conflict. They aren't merely seeking to appease warring parties. They aren't even trying to accommodate everyone. Instead, as William Barclay translates this verse, he says, they are people who produce right relationships in every sphere of life. Being a peacemaker involves working for God's vision for His world. If you remember the text that Dave read just a few moments ago so eloquently, that is God's vision, ultimately, for this world. It means pursuing justice, wholeness, harmony in our relationships with each other, in seeking reconciliation, restoration, both when we are wrong and when we wrong others, and when we're wronged. It means turning the other cheek, choosing to be wronged rather than being a source of hostility. It means doing the hard work of reconciling with our enemies without resorting to violence. It means getting involved politically and socially, promoting whatever peace can be achieved, and always working for human flourishing in whatever context we find ourselves. It means sacrificially pursuing the good of others, sometimes even at personal expense. In the 5th century, the monk Telemachus, who had been living by himself in the desert, trying to devote himself to God, decided that he really couldn't serve God without serving other people. So he abandoned his life of solitude, traveled to the city of Rome, arriving just in time to watch a victory celebration where Gothic prisoners were being forced to battle one another to the death as gladiators. Ironically, Rome at this time considered itself a Christian city, but the churches emptied to see this bloody spectacle. Well, when the monk saw the crowd of 80,000 roaring for the blood of the two gladiators as they fought each other, he was horrified. Telemachus leapt into the arena and placed himself between the two men, pleading with them to stop the conflict. Furious over the delay in their entertainment, the spectators actually stoned Telemachus to death. 3 days later, the emperor declared Telemachus a martyr and did away with the gladiatorial contests for good. Telemachus had achieved his goal at the price of his life. Today, the days of the gladiators are a thing of the past. But what about us? Where is our arena? Where do we carry on this work of peacemaking? Truth is, wherever we find ourselves, there's going to be conflict and disharmony. There'll be fear and confusion. Our job as kingdom people is to bear witness through our lives to the Prince of Peace, because we believe that it is in living as Christ did that the world begins to transform into something beautiful and good and hopeful, as described in our text in Isaiah and echoed in a text in Revelation. We're not charged today with the task of bringing the kind of peace that only God can bring, but we are called to embody, as in all the Beatitudes, a kingdom way of being in the world. We're called to be peacemakers because we are children of a God who loves peace. God's children do what God does, and there is no more God-like work for us to do than there is in peacemaking. And it is my hope and prayer that all of us here today, Santa Teresa Hills Presbyterian Church, the entire community of faith in San Jose, will grow in God's peace. We'll try harder to follow the footsteps of the Prince of Peace. And in doing so, we will be blessed as peacemakers. And that our homes, our churches, and our city will bring God's peace on earth as it is in heaven. Now, that's not going to be an easy task. It will require dedication and most likely struggle. Fortunately, Jesus promises help. He gives us his peace as a source of strength, as John records in his gospel in the 14th chapter, the 27th verse, where Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you." May God grant us the ability to be peacemakers, not just today, but this week, this year, and in all ways and in all times. Amen.